Chapter 661. Ethan really did resemble Kenneth. Both of them were mostly expressionless. Kenneth's expression made it hard to discern his feelings at the moment. After they had walked away, Olivia asked, "Mom, are you okay?" "Why wouldn't I be? She's just as underhanded as ever. She was just trying to make me angry." As if recalling something, Janice smiled. Her tactics weren't that ingenious. She simply manipulated my feelings for Kenneth. The more I cared about him, the easier I would lose control of my emotions. Even if I knew she was setting me up, I could never stop myself from falling for it. And the misunderstandings piled up over time. Since they were misunderstandings, have you ever tried to explain yourself? Janice brought Olivia to a cafe on the top floor to relax. She stirred her coffee in the air-conditioned cafe and told Olivia about her past. If he loves you, he should believe you even if you didn't explain yourself. If he doesn't love you, anything you do would irritate him. I was also stubborn then. I kept believing he would see that woman for who she was and return to me. I've committed suicide several times. I've jumped off a building, slit my wrists, taken sleeping pills, and even jumped in the sea. Everyone thought I was forcing him to come back to me with my life. In reality, I had lost the will to live. He hurt me so much that I became mentally ill. I became quick-tempered, and people started calling me crazy. Janice liked drinking black coffee. She took a few sips to collect herself. But people forgot that I was his wife. The woman he rightfully married. No one felt for me. They thought I was a fool that didn't get what she wanted and a failure that couldn't even keep her husband at her side. Olivia patted Janice's hand. "Mom, it's all in the past now. You should just stay away from that woman. The kindness you saw is just a facade." After so many years, I only realized why I had been so unhinged back then. She had planned it all out. She bribed the people around me and learned about my habits. She knew that I had fresh flowers in my room every day. So, she had someone spray them with drugs. Olivia was stunned. What kind of drug? One that was colorless and odorless. Prolonged exposure to it would cause delusions and emotional breakdowns. People exposed to it would be driven to madness slowly. How could she be so evil? Janice said calmly, "Liv, not everyone is born into a well-off family like us. I'm not saying that impoverished people are inferior, but they lead difficult lives. They would do anything in their power to improve their situations because they have experienced hardships. Getting with Kenneth was the only way Jessica could change her life, the lives of her whole family, and even the lives of her offspring. Naturally, she would cling to Kenneth with all her might. Does Miss Potts come from an impoverished family? Yeah, that's why she has learned to read people well. Maybe she's not even in love with Kenneth, but she would act docile and play the victim to keep her position as Mrs. Miller Sr. But men just eat that act up. Back then, she would frequently do things to agitate me. Pair that up with the drugs she used on me. I started to become unhinged. Why didn't you tell Mr. Miller Sr.? Janice smiled faintly. Why would I tell him? They deserve each other. It doesn't matter if it was the drugs or something else. The fact is that I had slit my wrists, jumped into the sea, and jumped off a building. He never cared about me. Even if I used to love him deeply. The love slowly disappeared after my repeated suicide attempts. It took me years to heal physically and mentally. I hope they stay together forever and never spread their toxicity to anyone else. Chapter 662. Olivia frowned. But that's so unfair to you. And what is fair? Love. Some people work hard just to survive. Some have to do the most degrading and tiring jobs. Some people can only gaze at the towering buildings, yet others were the successors of such buildings when they were born. Life's never fair. Olivia fell silent. Janice said sincerely, "Olivia, you're still young. Many things aren't as simple as you think they are. Can you guess why I hadn't made a move against Jessica even though I knew the truth? Is it because you're afraid of Mr. Miller Sr.? Afraid of him? You would only care about a man's feelings and what he thinks if you loved him. If the love is gone, he might as well be a stranger. I'm not doing anything because I know what Jessica is after." There wasn't a trace of love on Janice's face anymore. Her expression was completely indifferent. She wants to be the rightful Mrs. Miller Sr. Smart girl. Kenneth was head over heels for her back then, and Mr. Harold was furious. He insisted on casting me out and marrying Jessica. Even Jessica thought she had it in the bag because she was sure Mr. Harold wouldn't sever ties with Kenneth. But Mr. Harold actually did it. Not only did he cut Kenneth off from all the financial resources and social connections of the Miller family, he also publicly announced that Ethan was his sole successor. Olivia thought about Harold, who had been nothing but kind to her. She didn't expect him to be so decisive. What happened next? Kenneth wasn't able to make a living here, so he left with Jessica to start a business elsewhere. The funny thing is that I was the one who gave him the funds to start his business. I thought I would be able to control him because I held a 51% stake in his company. But I couldn't bring myself to hurt him. In the end, I was the one who was hurt. Olivia pitied Janice. She was too naive, compromising time and again for the man she loved. Such humble love would never change a man's mind. He is the successor that the Millers had trained, after all. Even if he started from scratch, he managed to do pretty well for himself. In order to prove himself, he has been moving his business back here. Also, he had been trying to repair his relationship with Mr. Harold. I know him too well. It must have been Jessica's idea to reconnect with Mr. Harold. So, Miss Potts isn't satisfied with what they have, and she's eyeing the Millers' fortune. That's right. No matter how much money Kenneth earns, it is nothing compared to the assets held by the Miller family, not to mention the old money that the Millers inherited from their ancestors. That woman will never be satisfied unless she has it all. She had been bringing her son to the Miller residence in the past few years, but she would always be driven away before she could meet Mr. Harold. Janice fiddled with her spoon. I haven't done anything to her because I wanted to see them fight amongst themselves. Think about it. How would he feel if he found out the woman he loved has always been a ruthless and cunning vixen? Olivia could already imagine the sense of satisfaction. I've gotten people to look into her these past 2 years. She is a cunning one. I don't have concrete proof for a lot of the things she has done. But just wait until I get to the bottom of it all. It would be interesting to see what happens to her then. Janice reminded Olivia, but you have to be careful. I told you that she's a formidable foe. She might make a move against you. I got it, Mom. Olivia nodded in agreement. She drank a few sips of her iced coffee and winced in pain. Chapter 663. Janice looked at Olivia and asked, "What's wrong? Where does it hurt?" Olivia pointed toward her stomach with a pained expression. "My stomach just started acting up." "It's nothing much. Since that's the case, you should stop drinking that iced coffee. I'll get the family doctor to give you a checkup." Olivia shook her head. "There's no need to go through all that trouble. I just got checked back in Arlandia not long ago. You might not have gotten a proper examination of your stomach. Since your stomach is acting up, you should get an endoscopy," Janice suggested. Olivia said dismissively, "It's just some mild stomach aches. Maybe it's because the coffee is too cold. I'll just take some medicine for it when I get home. For now, I need to plan Mr. Harold's birthday banquet. I'll go for an in-depth checkup after we're done with that." "That works." Janice beckoned for a bodyguard to come forward and asked him to buy some stomach medicine. She also asked someone to get Olivia a glass of warm water. Olivia enjoyed the feeling of being cared for. She was starting to accept Janice as her family. They talked about a lot of details for the birthday banquet after lunch. Olivia inquired hesitantly, "Mom, do we need to invite Mr. Miller Sr. to Mr. Harold's birthday party?" Janice said firmly, "Remember this. There's only one Mr. Miller that matters in the Miller family, and that is your husband, Ethan Miller." "Understood. I'll get Joanne to compile the list of guests for you. If you have the time to spare, you should familiarize yourself with the ladies in the Millers' circle of friends. You and Ethan will be the ones at the helm of the Miller family in the coming days." Olivia wanted to turn Janice down. Between studying medicine and managing the Miller family, she would prefer the former. Harold and Janice were intent on having her take on the mantle of the household's mistress. Olivia decided that she would come clean with them after the banquet. As the two of them were talking, Kenneth entered the cafe with his arm wrapped around Jessica's waist. Olivia was actually pretty impressed by Kenneth. He loved the same woman for so many years. Even at his current age, he was still in love with his wife. Most of the younger generation couldn't do the same. Janice whispered to Olivia, "What did I say? She'd show up no matter where I go." Jessica was like a cockroach, harmless but disgusting. "Mom, I'm done eating. Let's go." Janice stopped Olivia from putting down her cutleries. They had been talking for some time, and Olivia had just started to eat. "No need. Eat your fill. We're bound to meet them again in the future. I'm not the one in the wrong. If anyone should be hiding, it's not me." Olivia continued eating after she realized that Janice was unfazed. She knew about what Kenneth had done to Ethan in the past. She figured that Kenneth might not like her because she was with Ethan. So, she didn't intend to introduce herself to him. Jessica's voice came from behind. Her tone was still soft and docile despite being in her 40s. "Janice is here, too, Kenneth. Do we sit together?" Olivia had the urge to tell Jessica to start a class on how to be a two-faced bitch. She was sure it would be a huge success. Kenneth was about to sit down. Janice waved to a server and said, "We don't really know them. Please bring them to another table further away from us. I can't stand the sight of either of them." In Kenneth's memories, Janice had always been head over heels for him. She was his biggest fan, but everything she did disgusted him. It was the first time he saw disgust in Janice's eyes. Kenneth, who was a proud man, couldn't allow that to happen. He had a dissatisfied expression as he said in a deep voice, "Janice, I have something to tell you." Janice didn't even look at him. "Hey, can someone call the police? Someone's harassing us." The server noticed that the two parties weren't on good terms. He smiled politely and said, "Sir, miss, there are plenty of empty seats over there. Why don't we move you over there?" Chapter 664. Kenneth felt disrespected. He hadn't seen Janice in a long time. The woman who had been chasing after him was giving him attitude. Not only did he not leave, he sat down and said, "There's no need. We're acquaintances." The server looked at them awkwardly and didn't know what to do. Janice put down the knife in her hand elegantly. She took out some tissues and wiped her lips. She ignored Kenneth and Jessica. Then, she looked at Olivia tenderly and asked, "Why don't we go to another place for food?" Sure. Olivia had been waiting a long time for her food and was already starving. But she didn't feel like eating while looking at Kenneth and Jessica. She nodded politely at them and said, "We'll be leaving now." Kenneth was visibly upset as he watched Olivia and Janice leave hand in hand. "Stop right there." Kenneth was fed up by Janice's attitude. So, he took it out on Olivia. "You're Ethan's wife, which means you're my daughter-in-law. Is this how you treat your elders?" Janice was able to keep her cool before. But her anger flared up when Olivia, who was innocent, was dragged into it. As she was about to lose it, another voice rang, "Daughter-in-law. Surely you must be mistaken, Mr. Miller Sr." Ethan walked over from a distance and pulled Olivia into his embrace like a mother protecting her child. Like father, like son. Both of them protected their wives the same way. Kenneth hadn't seen Ethan in a while. Even though they had met years ago, his deepest impression of Ethan was when he suddenly came looking for him when he was 3 years old. Back then, Kenneth had been agitated by Janice's antics, and he took it out on Ethan. In the blink of an eye, the boy who had been smeared with cake had already grown so tall. And that face looked very similar to his own. Ethan looked more like him than Daryl. Ethan didn't know what Kenneth was thinking. He was no longer the little boy who yearned for his father's love. He exuded maturity and stoicism with his every move. Ethan said calmly, "Mr. Miller Sr., you told me that you weren't my dad and that you didn't have a son like me 20 years ago. Did you also forget that Grandpa had cast you out of the Miller family? If I'm not your son, how could she be your daughter-in-law?" Olivia almost let out a laugh. Ethan just said the most vicious words with the calmest tone. Every word was like knives stabbing into Kenneth's chest. Ethan Miller. Ethan was very calm, in stark contrast to Kenneth's anger. Ethan said, "My mom had just barely gotten over her trauma. We're very happy as a family. Please watch your wife closely, and don't let her disturb our peace." After a pause, he added, "And tell that foolish son of yours that I won't let him go so easily the next time he tries something." Ethan's words were spoken with complete disregard for Kenneth's image. Kenneth's ears were flushed, but it was unknown if that was due to anger or embarrassment. But Olivia was sure that someone as heartless as Kenneth wouldn't have a sense of shame. "We'll be leaving now. Enjoy your meal." As they were about to leave, Ethan bid them farewell politely. Olivia didn't know if Janice enjoyed the show, but she enjoyed every moment of that exchange herself. After they left the cafe, Janice said with reddened eyes, "Ethan, don't you hate me for what I did in the past? Why would you defend me in front of him? I used to hate you." Ethan didn't want to spend his days consumed by hatred. Cherishing every moment of happiness was the best option. Before he helped Janice into the car, he said, "I was too weak then. But now that I'm grown up, I will be able to protect you." Chapter 665. By saying that, it meant that Ethan had forgiven Janice completely. She had been ill during that time and was in a lot of pain. Besides, Janice was his mother that gave him life. Ethan had thought he would just cut ties with her and live his life away from her. He never expected Janice to come out of her trauma and reflect on her past mistakes. After everything he went through with Olivia, he just wanted to cherish the family that he had. Janice got in the front passenger seat while Ethan and Olivia sat together at the back. Olivia looked at him with a smile and asked, "Why did you come here?" "I came to bring you home. You didn't get to eat your fill just now, did you? I'll cook something up for you when we get home." Looking at the man who was completely devoted to him, Olivia smiled sweetly and replied, "Sure." She was starting to believe Janice's words. Ethan was different from Kenneth. A man like him would never hurt her, right? The bodyguard handed over some water and medicine. Ethan asked, concerned, "Are you feeling unwell?" "Don't worry. My stomach was acting up after drinking chilled coffee. I'll be fine after I take some medicine." Olivia had wanted to eat her fill at the cafe, but her meal was cut short by Kenneth and Jessica. Her stomach was still hurting, but she didn't talk about it. She just quickly ingested some medicine. Noticing Ethan's mindful stare, she gently pushed his hand and said, "I'm fine. You don't have to be so worried. I promised Mom that I would get an endoscopy after the birthday banquet." "So, you're really okay?" Ethan confirmed once more. "Do I look like I'm in pain?" Olivia had brought up stomach pains several times recently. But stomach issues generally reoccur frequently. Sometimes, it was normal for the pain to happen every day. Ethan's worries were temporarily alleviated when he thought about the medical examination Olivia did in the past that revealed nothing majorly wrong with her. He asked someone to bring Olivia something to eat before starting the car. "Here, eat something to ease that pain. We'll be home soon." "Okay." Olivia didn't hesitate. The roads weren't packed at that hour. Olivia leisurely enjoyed the scenery on both sides of the road. She liked it here more than Aldenvine. The air was better here, and the plants on the roadside looked pretty. "Do you like it?" "Yeah, it's completely different from Aldenvine. There are a lot of flowers on the side of the road. The scenery is better on the seaside streets. Let's take that route home." "Yes, Mr. Miller." The driver changed the route. Olivia's mood improved as she rolled down the window to feel the ocean breeze. The driver prepared to slow down as they were approaching a downward slope. His expression instantly paled, and his hands tightened around the steering wheel when he stepped on the brakes. The driver was a trained professional, so he was able to remain calm. "Mr. Miller, I have bad news. The brakes have malfunctioned." Olivia, who was eating a snack, froze. "What did you say?" "The brakes aren't responding, and we're approaching a long downward slope. The car will speed up, but I will try my best to steer us to safety. Make sure to brace yourselves, Mrs. Miller Sr., Mrs. Miller, and Mr. Miller." Ethan comforted the two women calmly. "Mom, Liv, don't be afraid. I'll contact some people to handle this." Ethan called the police immediately. He requested for the road to be locked down, the vehicles in the area to be redirected, and to prepare for an isolated collision buffer in advance. The other cars driven by Ethan's bodyguards took up the lane on the left so no one could overtake Ethan. As long as oncoming vehicles adhere to the designated routes, there shouldn't be any issues. Even though Ethan had already made arrangements for everything, Olivia's heart still began to beat faster. An image of a stormy night flashed in her head. Ethan wrapped his arms around her when he saw her pale expression. "Don't be afraid. I'm here. We'll be fine." Chapter 666. Olivia's fear didn't really come from the car spiraling out of control. It came from her subconscious. As they approached the slope, the driver tried his best to keep the car steady, but the car quickly accelerated to a dangerously fast speed. Olivia could hear the winds roaring in her ears. The winds were so loud they drowned out the sounds of Ethan's heartbeat. Images began flashing in her mind. A car barreled down the road in the rain, lightning flashed, and the sound of the thunder was deafening. There were also the blood-curdling cries of a woman. Olivia cried out in pain as she clutched her head. She was having a splitting headache. "Don't be afraid, Liv. I'm here," Ethan said as he tightly wrapped his arms around her. Olivia reflexively grabbed Ethan's collar. She closed her eyes and yelled, "I'm scared, Ethan. I'm so scared." Olivia wasn't scared of death. It seemed to be something that was worse than death. But she didn't understand what she was afraid of if she wasn't scared to die. As the winds kept blowing into the car, Olivia felt like her soul was being sucked out of her body. For an instant, a dreadful thought flashed in her mind. Maybe it would have been better if she died here. Her life was terrible anyway. Olivia was shocked by that thought when she came back to her senses. She was living a good life. Why would she want to die? The car was going over 100 miles per hour. Ethan hugged Olivia tightly and comforted her. "Don't be afraid." Olivia felt like the truth was within reach, but it didn't come to her. She simply couldn't recall what had happened. The driver said with a serious expression, "Brace yourselves. We'll be arriving at the designated collision area in around 6 miles. It wasn't a long distance, but every second of it was torture. A single miscalculation or accident could be catastrophic. If any car from oncoming traffic crossed over, the results would be devastating. Luckily, Ethan managed to get the situation under control quickly. There weren't a lot of cars around. They were able to get to the designated collision area that the police set up without a hitch. "Everyone, get ready. We're about to crash." The driver was a man of great mental fortitude. He was calm from the beginning. The car's momentum carried it for some distance before coming to a stop. The instant the car screeched to a halt, Olivia didn't feel weak at the knees, just that the stomach pain subsided while she was overwhelmed with anxiety. "Are you okay?" Ethan immediately checked on her. Olivia shook her head. "I'm fine. Mom, are you okay?" Janice, who was sitting in the front passenger seat, took off her seatbelt. Her expression was calm as if they were just on a road trip. She never let out a scream throughout the entire ordeal. "Death doesn't scare me." Janice had had several close encounters with death. She was calm as she got out of the car. Olivia's head was still throbbing as Ethan helped her out of the car. She looked at the ocean and frowned as she tried to recall the images in her mind. What important memory did she forget? It was right before her, but she couldn't figure it out. Olivia sharply inhaled as she clutched her head and crouched down. Ethan hugged her from behind. "Liv, you don't have to force yourself to remember the past. You'll only make yourself suffer." "But what have I forgotten?" Ethan tried to ease her restlessness. "It's all in the past. The future is what matters, and the present. Don't you want to know who did this to us?" Olivia raised her head slowly and met Ethan's gaze. "What happened wasn't an accident. Someone intentionally sabotaged our car." Chapter 667. Even a regular person would take good care of their car, let alone a wealthy family like the Millers. Why would the brakes malfunction? Olivia's mind gradually cleared up. Is this the person who also plotted against my baby? My mom had cut herself off from society for so long. It's unlikely that he is after her. The car I came over in was fine. Only your car was sabotaged. This person is probably after you. Olivia's eyes widened. He is so ruthless. Ethan had given her all his love since she woke without her memories. Even though he had told her repeatedly to be careful, the danger only started to feel real after she narrowly escaped death. The front of the car was completely warped. If there wasn't a buffer, and they drove straight into something solid, the car wouldn't just be warped. It would be completely crushed. Olivia pinched her own palm hard. Did I really not have any mortal enemies in the past? How much does someone have to hate me to go so far? Liv, I won't let him off easy. Ethan brought Olivia and Janice home. Olivia was down in the dumps, so Ethan stayed with her and comforted her patiently. Olivia finally fell asleep after the skies were completely dark. Ethan left the room after she fell asleep. He saw Janice leaning on a white pillar and smoking a short distance away. Mom, smoking is bad for your health. Janice snuffed the cigarette out and sat down. I've gotten used to it. Aren't you going to exercise at this hour? Janice was a very disciplined person. She would fast and practice yoga at night whenever she could. I was waiting for you. Janice leaned on the back of the chair nonchalantly and said, Tell me, what happened today? Weren't you there as well? Janice fiddled with the ring on her finger and said, I might have been crazy, but I am not stupid. The one who drove us to the mall was James. Why did our driver suddenly get swapped to one of your men? And when you called the police as things went wrong, they were too quick to respond. No matter how fast they mobilized, the buffer should be another 12 miles out, at least. Nothing escapes you indeed. Janice glanced at him and said, Don't tell me that you were the one that planned everything. Ethan shook his head. Of course not. Do you remember when I told you that someone has it in for Liv? Yeah, since I know someone planned to make a move, I wouldn't allow any danger to come close to us. James bought a bottle of water while he was waiting for you. He had an upset stomach shortly after drinking it. Someone tampered with the car after he left. Ethan played a segment of a clip for her on his phone. In the video, a man who wore a cap, sunglasses, and a face mask. With his entire body covered up, he got in the car while James was gone. The man got out of the car after a few minutes. There weren't any security cameras in his location. The clip was recorded by someone on the scene. Janice nodded. Since you've known about this, why did you still put us in danger? What were you trying to do? I've committed suicide so many times, but you're the one who got closest to killing me. I've encountered this person a few times. He's very cautious. If I changed cars, he would definitely be alerted. So you plan to catch him off guard? Ethan leaned on the table and said in a deep voice, That's right. We've discovered his hiding place, and Brent is headed over there with some men. Chapter 668. Janice stared at him for a while and sighed helplessly. You're indeed his son. You're just as ruthless as he is. Weren't you afraid that an accident might have happened? Everyone in the car would have been killed if anything happened. Mom, did you think I would put Liv in danger? That person is too cunning. He's not in the country but still has enough influence to pull the strings from behind the scenes. Every time I got somebody, they turned out to be scapegoats. Olivia would be in danger as long as this person is still alive. Do you know, I would see the twins when I closed my eyes. They were still so small. They stopped breathing as soon as they were born. I can't even find their bodies. Ethan looked into the distance. There was a bird perched on a branch and chirping happily. It didn't notice a snake behind it with its mouth wide open, ready to pounce. Ethan wrapped his fingers around the edges of the table. He loved the children as much as Olivia did. He had been anticipating the baby's arrival every day. He didn't expect things to go south. He tried to plan for everything but still failed to protect Olivia and the babies. He suppressed the pain of losing his children and didn't dare to show his pain before Olivia for fear it might affect her emotions. But whenever he was alone at night, he would toss and turn in bed as he watched the recording of the babies still in Olivia's womb repeatedly. He would even space out sometimes when he saw babies in their strollers on the streets. Ethan would never forget this grudge. He yearned for revenge every single day. Since the person dared to come after Olivia again, Ethan decided to do what he did after careful consideration. The person was so cautious. The people he sent on missions would be the best of the best. They would have strong counter-surveillance awareness. Ethan made the decision after much hesitation. He wanted to take this chance to catch the person. The reality was that he already had contingencies in place. He changed the route to seaside streets, where there was less traffic, and the roads were wider. The person was probably already celebrating when he saw them getting in the car. Janice asked, "So how did it turn out?" "The person is very cunning. He remained in the downtown area because he didn't want to be followed. But Brent has been on his tail. The operation should be nearing its end." Ethan had a feeling that he would be able to get some useful information if they could capture the man. This man had the same figure and walking posture as the one who pushed Connor down the stairs. Ethan had kept Connor's identity a secret for so many years. Even Marina didn't know, but this person managed to find out. The person had to be after Olivia and Connor. But why? What grudge could he have against Olivia? Ethan's phone vibrated. It was another message from Brent. "Mom, I'm heading out." Ethan stood up immediately. Janice looked at him coldly and said, "No matter what your goal is, love is not the same as everything else. Don't treat the woman you love like you do work. Your actions today were unacceptable. Even if you were trying to draw your enemies out and take them all out, accidents can never be fully anticipated. If they happen, no one would be able to predict the outcome." Ethan paused for a bit and replied, "Understood." He left hurriedly after that. Janice called out casually, "Joanne." The woman in a maid's uniform appeared and stood next to Janice. "Mrs. Miller Sr., watch over that kid. This is not Aldenvine. The situation in this city is not as simple as he thinks it is." "Understood." Chapter 669. Janice pushed open the door and frowned when she looked at Olivia, who was fast asleep. She sighed and muttered, "What an unfortunate child." Ethan had inherited the obstinance from her and Kenneth. Janice couldn't really say if the woman being loved by Ethan should be considered lucky or not. No. Olivia abruptly woke from a nightmare. She was covered in sweat. The person she saw when she opened her eyes was Janice instead of Ethan. She felt like she had embarrassed herself. "Mom, dear child, it's me. I'm just here to check on you. Are you okay?" "I'm fine. It's just a nightmare." Olivia rubbed her head. "What kind of nightmare?" Olivia couldn't remember the details of the dream. She could only recall that it was very chaotic and bloody. She couldn't recall the faces she saw in the dream. But she could feel the person's blood on her face like it was real. The dream was so realistic that Olivia felt like it was something she had experienced. In the dream, people were lying motionless on the ground everywhere. It was raining, and the ground was soaked in rain and blood. If that was something that actually happened, Olivia couldn't even begin to imagine how gruesome it was. She could still feel a chill when she thought about it. Olivia shook her head. "I don't remember anymore. I just know that it was terrifying." Noticing that she was feeling down, Janice comforted her. "I heard that you have a pet cat in Aldenvine. I'll get someone to transport it over here. You might feel better if you're reunited with your pet in a foreign place." "Thanks, Mom." Olivia felt closer to Janice. Janice was a really considerate person, but she was hurt so deeply by a man. Olivia felt bad for her. Olivia suddenly inhaled as she clutched her stomach. She was in shock during the day, so she didn't eat much. Her stomach was acting up. "Does it hurt a lot?" "Yeah, I'm quite hungry. I'll get someone to bring food over right away." Olivia drank a glass of warm water to ease the pain. For some reason, she started to feel uneasy. Even if she had gastric issues, she felt like the pain was too frequent. She wasn't like this when she had just regained consciousness. The pain slowly increased over the days. The medicine could only ease the pain temporarily. It was like a wound that didn't get better after medication and worsened instead. She figured that it was time for her to get an in-depth checkup. She endured the pain and ate dinner so Janice wouldn't be worried. Olivia had figured out a pain pattern. It wouldn't last. She just had to bear with it for a few minutes. "Mom, where's Ethan?" Olivia tried to change the subject to take her mind off the pain. "He went to find the culprit." "The culprit? Does he know who it is?" Janice wouldn't tell Olivia what methods Ethan used, so she glossed over it. "Yeah, surveillance footage showed that someone had tampered with the car. You should stay home for now. It's dangerous out there." "What about Ethan? Wouldn't he be in danger as well?" Olivia asked concernedly with her hand over her chest. "Don't worry, he knows what he's doing. Ethan met with Kelvin." They were at an abandoned warehouse by the beach. What's the situation? Don't worry, Mr. Miller. Brent followed him all the way here. We must be in the right place. I saw him entering the building. The place is surrounded by our people. He can't possibly escape. We just need to go in and capture him. Ethan cautioned, be careful. This man is very alert. Understood. We'll rush in to capture him when Brent gives the signal. Chapter 670. Mr. Miller, Brent has given the signal. We'll commence the operation. You just have to wait here while we capture him. Kelvin led the charge into the abandoned warehouse in excitement. For some reason, Ethan started to feel uneasy even though the operation had been planned carefully. He felt regret as he watched Kelvin rush in excitedly. He reached out to try and stop Kelvin reflexively. Cyril had hurt his leg a few months ago. Although he was recovering, he still wasn't in good enough shape to take part in the operation. He looked at Ethan curiously and asked, "What's wrong, Mr. Miller?" "I have a bad feeling about this." "Don't worry, Mr. Miller. Brent is a meticulous man. We pretended to fall for the person's trap, too. The operation should be flawless. Besides, the target is alone." Ethan frowned. Didn't he lead Brent around the downtown area for quite some time before coming here? What if he was making preparations for an ambush? You mean we're the ones that are being fooled? Ethan scanned the area and felt like something was wrong. It's possible. Signal for Brent to retreat. Ethan's intuition had saved him countless times in the past. It was telling him that they were in danger. Cyril didn't doubt Ethan's judgment. He immediately contacted Brent and Kelvin and told them to retreat. Just as the text was sent, explosions could be heard coming from the abandoned warehouse. Kelvin, who hadn't even gotten to the warehouse, was surrounded by the flames. He lay on the ground and called out toward the warehouse, "Brent." No one knew what happened, but one thing was clear. Ethan was right. They had been tricked. The fire started to spread, and chain explosions were set off. "It's an ambush. Run, Mr. Miller," Cyril yelled as he ran toward Kelvin. Kelvin was always an emotional person. The sudden explosions made Kelvin lose his mind. His first reaction wasn't to get away from danger but to run toward Brent. Cyril reacted just in time to grab him. "You have to get away. This is an abandoned factory site. The explosions would carry toxic substances with them." Tears were streaming down Kelvin's face. He bellowed, "Brent! Brent is still in there. Fool! He was right in the middle of the explosion. If he couldn't escape in time, he would be blown to pieces. Even if he survived the explosion, the fire would have gotten to him. You should have been prepared for this eventuality in this line of work. I'm not afraid of death, but I'm afraid of my brother dying. Your brother wouldn't want anything to happen to you, too. Listen to me. Get away from here. It's not safe." Cyril had to drag Kelvin away as the explosions intensified. Dark clouds rose into the sky. Toxic gases and fire started to spread in the area. Ethan finally understood what the person was doing while he was leading Brent around. They pretended to fall for his trap, but he was also doing the same. The person was too alert. He probably noticed Brent quickly. It was too late for regrets. Ethan calmed himself down and analyzed the situation. Since the person set up such a trap, his target would have to be Ethan. So, it was just the beginning. As he thought about that, a beam of infrared light cut through the smoke, aimed at his forehead.